to win the football game. They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. Oh, the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone. Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious. Yep. How about that?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to the Three Technique. Along with Trey Reeves, I'm Mitch Mason. Glad to be with you here on this college football playoff semifinal preview. There I am in the YouTube window. Glad to be talking with you live here on this, Sunday afternoon, I guess, with the Vrbo Fiesta Bowl, the Peach Bowl, staring us right in the face, Trey. And it's interesting. We're going to have some history made not only this weekend, but also for the national championship. None of these four teams have won a national championship in the last 25 years. Miami, of course, being the most recent champion to do that. And so I think when you talk about fresh blood, parity, competitiveness, really meaning something and getting away from just the same three or four teams that are always in the mix, I think that college football has achieved a great success despite all the lumps that we get from the transfer portal. But at the very least, we will have a very entertaining semifinal and a new national champion come the middle of January.
It's 100% a test case of do the ends justify the means, right? Because we've been clamoring for parity in some form or fashion for so long, but really dating back to the start of the 4-team playoff when it really became an Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia, and maybe throw in a random fourth team from out west some years affair. But yeah, I mean, we've got parity. We've got, like you said, teams that are going to be winning a national championship for the first time maybe ever if it's Indiana or Oregon, and first time in a long time if it's the other side of the bracket with Miami and Ole Miss. You mentioned Miami, 24 years, I think it is.
Yeah.
Ole Miss is going back to the 1950s, I think, 1960s. So
1962, is the last year that they claim a title. We'll get to that when we get to the preview.
Someone tweeted a graphic that said they had never won it, and a bunch of Ole Miss fans jumped on that and were not happy about that.
Yeah, we'll discuss that when we get to the Rebels, because it is an interesting little bit of history, I think, at least worth previewing. But Trey, before we get there, this is the first full regular episode that we've recorded here in the new year. We had the New Year's live show, but in kind of the spirit of keeping things fun and interesting, I posited in our group notes, I would love to know if you have a New Year's resolution, a theme of 2026, like what's got you kind of hunting for fresh ideas in the Reeves household?
Yeah, I mean, we've got some of the typical ones, right? Like we want to be more focused on our health and eat better, work out more. Mm-hmm. I've tried the read 30 books thing or whatever before, and I just always fail miserably with that. So we're downsizing this. I do want to read a little bit more, but we're going one a month. I think if I can get one book a month this year, 12 full books, which sounds so silly to say out loud, but I think that would be a big win for me personally. Other people might be laughing at that, but 12 books that I have never read before and no audiobooks. That's the goal. So we'll see that. So no audiobooks, no doing that. No shade to audiobooks. Love a good audiobook while I'm working on something at work, but this is hard paper, no screens, old school.
Yeah, I love that. I respect the heck out of that. My 2026 is, I think, going to be defined by one very particular theme. And I've termed it in our household the year of learning. So very similarly, I really want to dive into a number of subject matters. Over the back half of 2025, I found myself deep in the research game when it came to history, when it came to current events. Finances really have gotten deep in the stock portfolio game over these last few months, kind of a return to that. And so I'm excited to keep learning. I really want to understand the ins and outs and why things tick and how they function. And so reading will be a big part of that. Now I am a certified audiobook professional. I throw an audiobook on at time and a half speed, which some people say isn't actually great for your brain. I disagree. But I will I will also be reading hardcover or paperback books as well. Maybe not quite as many as you are, but very excited. Just kind of, feel like I'm rounding myself out. And I think that's something that my wife and I are really, really excited about, something we're going to do together. And so, cool little start to our New Year's resolution.
I love that. And real quick, in that spirit of
Yeah.
learning new things, I don't want to over promise and under deliver, but I was texting you about a really fun project that I want to work on, and it's requiring learning a lot of new computer skills for me. So I'll just leave it at that for now. It's a hard tease, but if I'm able to accomplish that this year, I think it's going to be a really fun thing that I'm excited to share with the whole college football space, honestly.
For sure. There's no doubt. There are things that we have in the works behind the scenes for the show, for the brand, for the greater college football fandom that I think could be really cool. And so if you are a subscriber to the show, a regular Jimmy and Joe, we're grateful to have you on board. I will put out just a public disclaimer. I was looking over our analytics course at the end of the year, reviewing the leaps and bounds that we've grown as a show. I mean, we literally added thousands of subscribers across all our platforms this year, which was awesome. But Trey, what the analytics showed is that there's more under the surface. We actually have an engaged listener base that goes far beyond those that are subscribed or following the show. So if that is you, would highly encourage you to make sure that you are following us on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. You're subscribed to the YouTube page. You may be listening along with us. The algorithm suggests us. You may see us on your Twitter feed, but you're not actually following. We would love if you would hit subscribe, follow, help grow the show. Leave us a review as well. We've got a number of 5-star reviews across all of our platforms. That helps us continue to find new college football fans. And like we both said, a lot coming down the pipe as far as guests, projects, etc. as we get into the off season and well beyond. Year 5 of the show, Trey, is right around the corner, which is incredible to think about. So again, thank you guys for joining us on the ride. Subscribe if you're not already, share with a friend, and let's keep growing this fandom and talking about the best sport on the planet. Trey, with that, I do want to get into one of the hiccups before we start our previews of those 2 semifinal games. As the portal has opened, is literally like a third of college football I saw is in the transfer portal right now. The numbers are staggering. I think they're up to 35 or 36% of the sport, which is just gross. Over 4,000 players are in the portal. Those qualms, issues, hiccups are well cataloged. But there was one instance, Trey, that made headlines over the weekend, and I kind of wanted to get something off my chest, have you react to it as well, and not putting any blame on either side of the fence here. But I do think it's an interesting case study of just how difficult this sport has become to manage. The University of Texas lost a wide receiver in Parker Livingston, who went into the transfer portal just a couple of days ago. He's been on visits to Indiana. He's now on a visit to their arch rival in the Oklahoma Sooners. Parker Livingston put out a statement saying, I wish things had been different. I wish I could have stayed a Longhorn, but it is what it is, and I'm moving on. Parker Livingston grew up in Austin, the Austin area. He was a lifelong Longhorn fan before he got to the University of Texas, where he was a very productive wide receiver. And oh, by the way, he was Arch Manning's roommate as well. So deep ties to the future of this program. And now he's in the portal, essentially claiming that the University of Texas wasn't willing to commit to him. Now, depending on who you talk to, where you read, Texas had a couple $100,000 offer out to him. So it wasn't like Parker wasn't being compensated for his time and his talents. But ultimately, Texas kind of said, hey, if you want more, you're going to have to go elsewhere. And from what Texas fans and beat writers are saying, it was with the sole purpose of reclaiming that money to go after a bigger wide receiver, like a Cam Coleman, who is anything but a sure bet to go to Texas. In fact, if you read the reports, it's more likely that he ends up at Texas A&M or Texas Tech or USC than he does on the 40 acres. All of that can change, but without a doubt, it pokes a nerve that I have, where you have on one hand schools that are playing the if-then game, right? Trying to land the biggest fish, trying to find the biggest and best piece to plug in at the expense of other players, other productive players on their roster in some cases. And on the other side of the fence, you have agents who are unlicensed in many cases and telling very talented players, hey, man, you can go get a better deal elsewhere where, yes, their bank account might benefit, but in reality, their production on the field, their overall career course might not benefit at all. And we see that on a year in, year out basis with the portal. I just felt like this instance in particular, with a guy that has so many inherent ties to a university, he should be a Longhorn legend by the time that his career finishes up. And instead, he might end up playing for the Oklahoma Sooners, which to me just would really not sit right.
Yeah, it's the dark side of the portal, right? And there's a ever-growing dark side of the portal that I feel like we see more and more of every single year. And before we get too far into this, I know we have a Texas following that likes to point out when we single out Texas. So I'll just say, disclaimer, it's not just Texas that is doing this. This is happening all around the country. It's happening at every single school. And like I can think of one at our school, Texas A&M, right? Theo Nordstrom has been in the program for 3 or 4 years. He is in the portal right now. Then A&M has gotten 2 tight end commits already. I know they were wanting him to stay, so it might be a little different. It might be the agent thing that you're talking about. But yeah, it's the dark side of the portal where coaches are under so much pressure from boosters and fans and everything above to perform and get the best possible players on their team so that they can make sure that they are competing for a playoff spot. And if you zoom in on Texas, you know that they are looking at what happened on the field this year and saying that we didn't do enough in the portal last year. We didn't go get the big fish in the portal to set us over the top. That's why we got passed by a little bit in the SEC. I know they figured things out at the end of the year, certainly. But that's why we weren't ready to go from the jump, and that's why we ultimately missed the college football playoff. So they are doing everything that they can to make sure that they are the most competitive team that they can be next year on the field. So yeah, it's a tough thing. Like, I don't want to sit there and blame the coaching staff at Texas for doing that because they, especially at a place like Texas and anywhere that's going to, for lack of a better term, trapdoor a kid, they are under so much pressure to win and their jobs are quite literally on the line. So I'm not going to fault a coaching staff for doing that, more so fault the system that we've created that just makes that a viable option. It's really sad. It's really hard to see. And it really makes you wish for days gone by where you could watch a kid like Parker Livingstone, like, grow over 4 years in Texas. Because I think if he stayed in that offense for 2 more years, he's probably a day 2 draft pick, right? Like, he's going to put up the production in that offense to be a really high draft pick. And he certainly still could at a school like Oklahoma or wherever he ends up. But sad to see, hate to see stories like that. And it's certainly happening all over the country.
Yeah, I mean, you had visions of Arch and Parker being the next Colt McCoy and Jordan Shipley, right? I mean, that was supposed to be the dynamic duo. And you're right, well put. Not the fault of any one entity, university or player agent, but a compilation of decisions and situations that all come together to really spell the end of that magic, right? Where a kid spends 4 years at a university and the hometown hero grows up, becomes the hero himself, and then rides off into the sunset. Those are just going to be increasingly rare as we go along. So yeah, just wanted to point that out. I feel like a lot of other fans from what I've seen are echoing that frustration. And that just seemed like kind of the perfect encapsulation of so many things I wish that were different about college football, but it is what it is. And with that, I think we should get to the games on the field, shall we? We have just 3 left in the 2025 season. And let's start with the Vrbo Fiesta Bowl, the first semifinal game. This is on Thursday night, number 10 Miami against number 6 Ole Miss, 6:30 p.m. first kick. Miami is 3.5-point favorites over the Ole Miss Rebels. And Miami and Ole Miss got to the semifinals through very different means. Miami absolutely suffocated Ohio State's offense, while Ole Miss had all kinds of offensive highlights to get past the Georgia Bulldogs. So my first question to you, Trey, in this matchup on its face, which side of the ball catches your attention? Is it Miami and their defense? Is it Ole Miss and their offense?
Man, that's a fantastic question because I think Miami's defense is the best unit on this field. I think when you just break it down, I think Miami has proven on the defensive side of the ball. What they did to Ohio State is just incredible. What they did to Texas A&M, a team that averaged over 30 points a game in the SEC this year, it was incredible. Just game wreckers up front that can totally put a game on their head. But this Ole Miss offense, man, like what they did to Georgia 2 times this year, has the ability to be game busters as well. Trinidad Chambliss is kind of playing out of his mind right now. And that offense, I think, is the most interesting matchup for this Miami defense potentially still in this field. I think that the way that they go about things with the tempo, with the balanced attack that they can bring, and then Trinidad Chambliss just making something out of nothing every time that he touches the ball and things seem to be going awry, it makes it really difficult to say that, yeah, Miami is 100% going to do what they did the first 2 rounds of this playoff. Now, I still lean the Miami defense here in that matchup. I think that the overall peak talent, if they can continue to play at the absolute peak level that they have played the last 2 years and get a big game-changing play, that's what really did Georgia in, right? That Georgia couldn't get the big stop when they needed it or the big turnover when they needed it most. And Miami has done a really great job of doing that the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. So providing they can play to that pinnacle and keep getting those big plays in the biggest moments, I'm going to lean Miami. But like I said, the Ole Miss offense is the most interesting matchup to me, just mano a mano for this Miami defense left in this field.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how the wide receivers for the Rebs specifically fare against a secondary for Miami that has been very good, especially in these last several games. I mean, you talk about locking down the Ohio State wide receivers. Yes, Jeremiah Smith had a breakaway catch, but they didn't hurt you to the degree that you really expect the Buckeyes to be able to. And part of that was the defensive backs locking up. Part of that is, of course, the front 7 from Miami breaking through that offensive line and getting in the face of Julian Sayin. You know, you look at Sayin's numbers and he still threw for like 280 yards, something like that. I mean, it was a respectable total. But as you watch the game, outside of a couple of key plays, it never felt like the Buckeyes had any sort of rhythm. Now, the difference between Julian Sayin and a guy like Trinidad Chambliss, we saw Trinidad go full Michael Vick mode against Georgia. I mean, he was weaving all over the field. He was running back to his goal line and then back up the field to deliver a dot down the field. His ability to create plays with his legs as well as his arm truly gave me flashbacks to watching prime Mike Vick at Virginia Tech. And so I think that is going to be an element that Miami has not seen at an elite level this season, right? They took away the legs of Marcel Reed in College Station, but Marcel had not had that game-changing ability to move outside of the pocket, throw on the run accurately deep down the field. Trinidad does. And so that's going to add pressure to the Miami defensive backs to not only lock down those receivers for the first, 2-3 seconds, but then chase them around the field as Chambliss tries to extend the play. That's, for me, one of the most fascinating matchups, I think, of the entire weekend. Now, I promised you a peek behind the curtain of national championship history, right? Miami, of course, their last championship came in 2001. Everybody remembers that. Ole Miss, on the other hand, claims, and I put claims in air quotes, 3 national championships in the 50s and 60s. I feel like I'm retweeting the I Declare Championships office meme I created when Auburn decided to go down that path in the preseason. It's interesting to note that Ole Miss, I believe, went undefeated in all 3 of those seasons. So this was before we had a full-on national championship game. This was when newspapers and coaches were basically just saying that team. That's who the national championship is.
As God intended.
As many have said. The interesting thing is, despite Ole Miss having authorities around the sport say the Ole Miss Rebels are the national champions this season, the AP and the coaches poll has never once acknowledged Ole Miss as the national champion at a season end. So Ole Miss fans certainly will claim those championships, and hey, more power to you, right? I'm not going to try and take that away from you. I do think it sets up a fascinating storyline. If Ole Miss can get through this game, they will be certainly playing in their first national championship game ever, but they will also have a chance, in my mind, to raise a legitimate trophy, an undisputed championship trophy for the first time ever. And that's something that's really cool, going back to the intro of the show.
Now, if that happens, we're getting the cart way before the horse here. Do they send a ring to Lane Kiffin, or do they already have his ring size? Or because in professional sports, everybody that was part of the team at any point in the season, even if they only made one appearance, gets a ring, right?
Yeah, which like in the MLB, I love that because a guy might literally come up, pitch a single inning, might pitch a third of an inning, and if that team goes on to win, he gets a ring. Yeah, I think Lane probably gets a ring. He's getting checks from LSU for every Ole Miss win. The condition of that ring, that's immaterial. That ring might be missing a few diamonds or might have a little bit of a scuff to it, but yeah, sure, Lane can have a ring.
Okay, interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, we're like I said, we're putting the cart way before the horse here. We haven't even made our pick here for this Fiesta Bowl, but yeah, I'm really excited to see this Ole Miss offense. On the other side of the ball, though, Mitch, I think it's very interesting to see if Miami is still able to run the ball the way that they have in these first 2 rounds of the playoffs. Ole Miss has certainly been able to be run on at times this year, and they're certainly susceptible to the deep ball. So I'm not necessarily excited about the matchup of this Ole Miss defense and what Miami they kind of their weaknesses feel like they play into what Miami does best for my money.
I think I agree with that. By the numbers, it certainly seems to slant towards the Hurricanes, right? Miami's defense, 4th in scoring, 5th in pass defense. They've got 46 sacks on the season so far. That also includes the playoff games. Ole Miss's offense is 10th in scoring. They're 3rd in passing, and the offensive line to this point has been very good. They've only allowed 18 sacks this entire season. That being said, when I put these two teams on the field in my mind, I think Ole Miss is going to score some points. I think that Trinidad Chambliss is going to have some electric moments that really get us excited for a hopeful 6th season. He's awaiting a decision from the NCAA on a 6-year medical waiver, essentially. I think it would be great for college football if he gets to come back. It would be terrible for the sport, quite honestly, if the NCAA decides to try and big time him and say, no, your career is done. So I'm rooting for Trinidad Chambliss. I think if there's anybody in this game I'm rooting for, it's the Ole Miss quarterback. But I do think that Miami will win this game. They cannot get into a shootout with Ole Miss. We know that. The Miami offense is not capable of winning a track meet, or at least they haven't shown that to be the case, certainly in the back half of this season. But I trust Miami's defense that much. I cannot get away from the theme that we keep rehashing week over week, really for the past couple of years on this show, Trey. Defense wins championships. And at the end of the day, Ole Miss, I don't think has played a defense with the ferocity that Miami has shown these past few weeks. They've certainly scored points on some good defenses, no doubt about it. But this Miami unit is playing at a different level right now. And I do think that the back end will have enough of a clamp on those wide receivers to let the front 7 go to work. I think offensively, if Miami can run the football, which you mentioned is not necessarily the best matchup for the Rebs, I think that, again, plays into the Canes' strength. They get the ball out of Carson Beck's hands quickly with Shannon Dawson calling those screens, those short passes to their wide receivers in space. I'm going to lean Miami to win this game. I don't know that I would lay 3.5 points where it is right now, but I will take the Canes to move on to a national championship.
Man, the only thing that I have as a holdup on that, because I'm with you like 99% of the way there, and then I think about what we were saying about the Georgia defense going into the Sugar Bowl, right? Yeah. Like we were really high on that Georgia defense. We highlighted that in the 5 games after the Ole Miss game, they gave up fewer points than they did in the first like 5 drives of the Ole Miss game. So the first time around. So I think Miami has proven, if it wasn't for Indiana and what they did to Alabama in the Rose Bowl, you'd 100% be saying that Miami is playing the best defense in all of college football right now, at least over the past 2+ weeks. But Indiana, that certainly throws a debate in there with what they did to Alabama and what they did to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. I think what separates Miami from Georgia right now when it comes to matching up with Ole Miss is what you said about the defensive backs. All the attention has been on the front 7 for Miami, and rightfully so, but those defensive backs, man, are having a field day the last couple of games. The interceptions that they've made, the just plays on the ball against elite wide receivers like Casey Concepcion, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate. Yes, they've let some guys be open and their defensive line has covered them by making the plays and making sure that the quarterbacks couldn't get the ball off. But I think that those defensive backs are going to play the defense. I'm going to take Miami to cover this one. We're going to get a 10 seed in the national championship game if this plays out. And I think that's just that's incredible, right? Like if we just step back and say, yeah, a double-digit seed, something that no one said would happen probably ever in the college football playoff is going to happen in just year 2 of the 12-team format. I think that's pretty incredible.
It never would, or some would say it never should happen, right? That if you weren't inside the top 4, if you weren't inside the top 8, should you even have a chance to play for the national championship? I think it's going to be a fascinating data point. Another reason why I just hate the fact that we seem to rush to change the models and the details as quickly as we can. Just sit back, let it play out. I think that would be better for the long-term health of the sport. Last thing on the Canes before we move on. If Miami does win the Fiesta Bowl and beat Ole Miss and secure a spot in the national championship game, what in your mind, what does that do for Mario Cristobal's legacy? Is it still wait and see mode? We want to see him actually get a ring. Has he dispelled a lot of the hesitancies and the fears and the critiques that we've had of him over the past few years?
For a week, at least, right? But if he does something silly in the national championship game, it's going to be right back into that conversation. No, but it's really hard in modern college football because I think we're in this post Saban dynasty, post Kirby dominance era right now, right? Where we're never going to see something like that again with the parity, at least until there's another paradigm shift with roster building and someone finds a way to take advantage of that. So it's really going to be year to year with a lot of these guys, unfortunately, as they build their legacy. Like I think that how many times have we seen in the post like peak Alabama? So I'll say like post 2019, 2020-ish. How many times have we seen a coach reel off one really good year and then fail to get back to that standard, right? I'm thinking about Dykes at TCU. I'm thinking about Kalen DeBoer right now with how he's not been able to transition Alabama and get them to the height that he got Washington in that 1 year. I'm thinking like you could name off probably several more examples in the not too recent past. So he's going to be in that group of, yeah, that was an awesome year, but to really cement the legacy, you got to find some form of continuity. It doesn't have to be a national championship run every single year, but being in the conversation, at least making the college football playoff more often than not. Or you're going to have a lot of questions about, was it just kind of catching lightning in the bottle?
Or you could be Kirk Cignetti and snap your fingers in year 2.
And he might be, yeah. And like right now, he looks like the closest thing we've seen to that Nick Saban thing, right? Because he's still so early in his development of that program, and he has them just humming. We'll talk about them more in a second. But I mean, yeah, he could throw a major spoke in the wheel, to not use a phrase that apparently got us in trouble with YouTube last week. But yeah, he could throw a major cog in the gears, I guess, to use that term.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, in case you're following along with us live, I think Indiana has 6, maybe 7 portal commits today. They got Josh Hoover, they got Nick Marsh, wide receiver out of Michigan State, who was on my fantasy team 2 years ago as a true freshman. Indiana is getting really whoever they're looking at right now, which is truly incredible as Cignetti tries to run to a national championship in just his second year as a head coach. He's got some Lisan Al-Gaib vibes. I feel like the chosen one up there in Hoosierland. Speaking of which, let's talk Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, the #1 undisputed top team in the country, I think right now. Indiana, 4-point favorites over the Oregon Ducks. They're the 5 seed, 6:30 p.m. on Friday night. Trey, this is a rematch from earlier on in the season when the Hoosiers went up to Eugene and beat the Ducks in Autzen Stadium. Neither of these teams has ever won a national championship in their program's history. Oregon obviously played for a championship several years ago. They were beaten by Auburn in the Cotton Bowl, of all places. And you know that Phil Knight has been desperately chasing a championship ever since being oh so close to claiming one just a few years ago. But they've got to go through the hottest team, the most dominant force in the sport. Of course, everybody had the Indiana Fighting Hoosiers as that team before this season started. And I went back, Trey, and I watched that first game from up in Autzen. And there were a couple of observations that we'll get to throughout this preview. I thought first and foremost, the success that Indiana's defensive line had against Oregon, just simply by disguising the coverage, disguising the pressure, only sending 4 at times and still being able to get to the quarterback. That's, I think, item number 1 that Dan Lanning has to address with an offensive line that at times has been very good, at times has struggled in the pass protection. If Dante Moore doesn't even have time to look down the field, you could see another Rose Bowl type result, in my opinion, on Friday night.
Man, the line is 4 still, right?
3.5.
3.5 for Indiana. This never goes well. And this is not financial advice, but as we sit here on Sunday afternoon leading up to this game, does that not feel like almost free money? Like you have to really, really squint to see Oregon keeping it within a field goal right now.
Based off of what we saw in the Orange Bowl, it's hard to imagine Oregon just automatically moving the ball a little bit more freely than they did against Texas Tech. Yes, I do think the line is suspiciously low. I'll say that.
That's not to say that it won't be a close game. I think that this could be a very good, entertaining game, but 3.5 points with the way that Indiana has been playing is very, very interesting to me. But I mean, and just to throw one more in there, Oregon also lost to Ohio State, I think it was, in the first year of the 4-team playoff, right? Was that the other shot at the Natty?
Was that the national championship?
That was the national championship, yeah, because Ohio State beat Alabama and right through the heart of the South. And then Oregon, that was the game that Jameis Winston had the viral, like everybody remixed it on Vine play where he like fell backwards and threw it 50 yards backwards. But yeah, I think that the way that Indiana is playing right now and the way that we saw the offense for Oregon really didn't win them that game in the Orange Bowl. They did just enough and they took advantage of Texas Tech mistakes, certainly. But I don't have a ton of confidence in Dante Moore going up against that defensive front of Indiana. And they just seem so focused, man. Like they just seem like they are taking on the personality of their coach and just want to rip people's heads off and then be like super nice guys in the post-game press conference afterwards after just ripping you limb from limb. And that's just such a confident aura that they're playing with right now. But I think the one wild card is if Dante Moore could get things going with his feet. But the only thing that you'd think that he would be, he's put up some nice numbers on the ground, right? But you watch him run when he needs to get a certain amount of yardage, right? If he needs 5 yards on 3rd down, I feel like he's going to get 4. Like right now, the way that he's running, he just doesn't seem to have the vision or the ability to. Some quarterbacks just have that in them to fall forward and get those yardage, right? We saw that with Riley Leonard with Notre Dame last year. And I think Fernando Mendoza is one of those guys. If Fernando needs 5 yards on 3rd down and he takes off scrambling, he's probably going to get 6 with the way that he's just craftily able to get those yardage. But Dante Moore, if he could figure out how to extend those drives with his legs and use his legs as more of a weapon, I'd be a little bit more excited about Oregon's prospects. But I think you saw that in the Orange Bowl, and I think you've seen that a few times this season.
Yeah, my concern for the Ducks starts up front with that offensive line. You watch them against Texas Tech, and I'll use their left tackle, Isaiah World, as an example. Mountain of a human. At times can be just a brick wall that you cannot get through, cannot get around. That being said, he really struggles with speed off the edge. He gets a little flat-footed. He gets stuck on his heels, and then suddenly you're around him and Dante's either taken a hit or sacked entirely. So for me, I think the tackles for Oregon have to play their best game of the year. They've got to protect, especially on that left side, they've got to protect Dante's blind side and give him time to look down the field. When Moore is confident in the pocket, when he can step through a throw, we've seen him make maybe the most NFL caliber throws of any quarterback this season. We've seen him throw it into tight windows. We've seen the arm power. We've seen the accuracy, but he's got to have the confidence that he's not about to get his helmet blown off from his backside. So if Oregon's offensive line can hold up in pass protection, that's step number one. Number two, they had some really nice runs against Indiana, especially in the first half, somewhat in that third quarter, and then obviously some desperation mode crept in the fourth quarter. Moore throws a couple of bad interceptions. It happens. One of them was tipped. Can't do anything about that. But specifically, I found that Oregon sealing off one side of the line of scrimmage and running the counter had Indiana's linebackers taken a step towards the initial feint and then leaving that backside wide open. If Oregon can get the running game going with Jordan Whittington, with Gideon Davidson, right, as their true freshman, kind of the bowling ball back, that shortens the game. That helps their defense not be on the field quite as much. And I think it can establish the rhythm that Oregon needs in order to pull off an upset. I mean, that's what it would be. I know it's hard to beat the same team in a year twice, but Oregon will have to pull off an upset to beat the Indiana Hoosiers. And I think the running game is going to be key to that as well. Finally, on defense, one thing that I noticed, especially early on, Oregon's defensive line brought power to the equation. And I think they did a good job of going right through the heart of Indiana's offensive line with that power. Amari Washington had a great early sack by going right through the right guard. If Oregon, whose defensive line has played very well down the stretch, we saw them absolutely abuse Texas Tech's offensive line. If they bring that to the equation, they keep Fernando Mendoza from looking down the field. They prevent the running game, which has been lethal lately for Indiana, by simply winning at the point of attack with power. That, I think, is worth its weight in gold for the Ducks championship chances.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned this going into the Rose Bowl, that Indiana, you'd think that with, Heisman winning quarterback and all the high flying offense that they've had and the wide receivers that they have, right? Omar Cooper and Elijah Surratt, you think that they'd be a pass first team, but they really want to establish the run and be a run oriented team. So to your point about, keeping Indiana off the field, the teams that have been able to keep Indiana close and within striking distance have held them under 4 yards a carry. If they are pushing even 3.5 or hitting 4 yards a carry, you're going to have a bad time because they are churning drives. They are keeping your offense off the field. Mitch, Alabama only possessed the ball 8 times in the Rose Bowl.
Wild.
They got 4 possessions in the first half and 4 possessions in the second half. So if you're hitting at a 25% rate, you're looking at 14 points. And that's not going to be enough to beat Indiana when that machine is just moving. So you've got to contain their run game and do as good a job as possible at that. And yeah, like you said, you've got to, on the other side of the ball, give your defense a chance to catch their breath and make sure that you are moving the ball as well. So yeah, it's going to be an uphill battle. It's certainly difficult to beat a team twice, but I just keep going back to the look in the eye every time that you see Curt Cignetti and every time that he's shown on the sidelines. He just looks, and he has looked all season, like he wants to tear you limb from limb, shake your hand afterwards, and just move on to the next thing and just be completely unemotional about it. And it's a killer instinct that I just don't think anybody else has shown that they can match right now. So I'm going with Indiana. I think that they're going to win the game probably by a 10 to 14 points. I would say I think Oregon's going to hang tough. I think it's going to be a very entertaining game, but Indiana just looks too much, and I think they pull away late.
It's a true throwback, I think, to that killer instinct that Cignetti has. Fascinating, because on the other side, you've got an absolute psychopath in Dan Lanning, who I don't know what is in his pregame protein shake, but my goodness, it is a concoction that certainly brings him alive. I'm going to go with Indiana as well. And I think one element that we haven't talked about is going to be key in this game, and that's the Oregon defensive backs. They are painfully thin right now, Trey. They've had multiple guys hit the portal ahead of the semifinal game. just to get their name in, to look for a new place to play, which for me sends all kinds of red flags. But you mentioned Elijah Surratt, Omar Cooper. You've not talked about Charlie Becker. You haven't talked about the tight end game, the passing out of the backfield.
Indiana
has
that are 1-2 punch. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You have so many options to throw to if you're Fernando Mendoza. And Oregon, quite simply, is running out of pieces to defend that, right? Finney Jr. obviously had a career game against Texas Tech in the Orange Bowl, but he's just one guy. You've got to have the depth, especially with the speed and the physicality that Oregon runs with, in order to keep up with them. I went back and watched the film from that first game, and one thing that absolutely stood out: Oregon wants to run man coverage. Their defense is at its best when they're going mano a mano. Indiana was able to get separation on comeback routes, and they gashed the Ducks time and time again, especially with Elijah Surratt, just winning at the top of the route, creating separation, coming back, and you've got 15 to 20 yards right there. Mendoza was throwing the ball accurately. He had time to get the ball away, and Oregon never really had an answer to that. Now, maybe in the interim, they found a way to adjust, but with a thinner defensive back room, I just don't know that I'm going to trust Oregon's DBs to hold up for the entirety of the game. So I'm on the Hoosiers as well. I'll take Indiana minus the 4, minus the 3.5, depending on where that line is when you check it as well. I like the Hoosiers to win this game convincingly, and I like the Hoosiers to play for a national championship for the first time in program history.
What a story. I mean, I keep going back to it. Like, if that's what we get, and if Oregon playing for another national championship is what we get, that's a fantastic story as well, with Dan Lanning coming up there and revitalizing that program. All of these teams that we're talking about tonight, Mitch, I think the underrated storyline is there's not one that I'm like actively rooting against to win a national championship. Like every year, usually around this time, like there's the blue blood that's won a million of them. There's, the team that maybe went really hard in the portal, or the coach that you don't like. I'm happy with all 4 of these teams winning. I think it's a really cool story. I think you can make a Disney movie out of any of these 4 teams winning a national title. But yeah, I think if Indiana makes it to the national championship game, just a crazy, crazy college football story when you think about where that program has been, the doormat that they were before Cignetti got there, and just how quickly he's turning around. I know that that's not breaking any news to anybody that listens to this show, but just gotta throw it out there to recognize it.
In an era where, and I keep saying this, I think it's never been easier to accumulate wins through the regular season. It's never been harder to win a national championship, or a conference championship for that matter. Kirk Cignetti is playing this game on rookie mode. I mean, he is playing on a different difficulty than everybody else, because not only has he done it so quickly, he's made it look so effortless, right? The coaching job that Indiana has done, from Cignetti on down to the position coaches, is something that I think a lot of other programs are going to have to study, because you have kind of relatively unheralded coordinators, and Mike Shanahan on the offense, Brian Hayes on the defensive side. Those guys were not really at the top of many lists for head coaching vacancies in this last coaching carousel. And yet that Indiana program has worked so seamlessly. The game plan has been so in lockstep with all 11 guys on the field. It's felt like a clinic. And while the offense may be more skewed towards the college ranks and the college play style, it's really felt like we've been watching an NFL program with the efficiency, the professionalism that they've run. I mean, hat tip to Cignetti. Obviously, we're not the first to do that, but I just continue to be blown away week in and week out as someone who has helped run front offices for college programs, to see what they're doing on a day in and day out basis and how easy they make it look. It's incredible. It never has ceased to amaze me over these last, not even 2 years.
Yeah. And I think likewise, if it is Oregon that pulls off the upset and wins this game, Dan Lanning needs a lot of flowers for what he did, because obviously he had a better starting point than Kurt Cignetti did with Oregon at Indiana, but that was an Oregon program that had fallen off a little bit, right? We think about Oregon with this mystique that, yeah, they're always in it. They're always competing for conference titles, and they hadn't won the Pac-12 in quite a few years since Dan Lanning had gotten there. They hadn't really played for the years that they did win the Pac-12. It wasn't a year that warranted inclusion in the 14 playoffs. So yeah, he's done a great job helping that program reach its ultimate ceiling as well. And I think that he's another guy to look out for. We talked about Cignetti, but Dan Lanning is certainly a guy to look out for on that dynasty watch, right? Like he has the tools and he has the just unabashed intensity that really resonates with a football team to make sure that they are in it year in and year out.
Well, you and I are on the same side of both of these matchups. We've got the Indiana Hoosiers, the Miami Hurricanes playing for a national championship. We cannot wait to see how this unfolds this weekend, Thursday night, Friday night. We'll obviously get our reactions up post game and cannot wait to bring the season to a conclusion, crown a new national champion. I think that storyline is just going to continue to be one of our favorites, that the playoff system has delivered, and it's going to give us a new champion when it's all said and done. For Trey Reeves, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Until next